Hi, I'm Patrick Manning at Black Desert Resort. We are proud sponsors of Beyond the Game. I recognize that wins aren't always measured by points. Scoreboards don't always define champions, but the story this athlete has to tell, it does. This is why Black Desert Golf Course is proud to sponsor Beyond the Game to share this inspiring story with you. Please enjoy.
You're listening to the Utah Checkdown Podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown Podcast. I am Josh Furlong. Happy to be back today talking about Utah football, as always. We are going to jump right into this, but first let me tell you a little bit about our partner, Black Desert, who is helping with the KSL.com Beyond the Game video series. The videos highlight various athletes and give an inside look into their life. Recently, we talked with former Utah offensive lineman Garrett Bowles about how a second chance at life allowed him to pay it forward to troubled youth. You can check out that video and many others on KSL.com. Black Desert is a new resort destination in St. George that features a championship Tom Weiskopf 19-hole golf course that combines a private club feel with a destination resort golf amid lava fields and 360-degree vistas. Black Desert is changing entertainment in southern Utah, and they're just beginning. Black Desert, where remarkable is within reach, home of the Black Desert Championship PGA Tour. All right, so we are back. I was hoping to have a guest today, but that fell through mostly because of my plans. My week has been incredibly busy with things unrelated to Utah football, which is not fair to you guys, but I wasn't able to get a guest this week. But starting next week, hopefully, I'm going to have a special guest that is going to be Utah-related, that is hopefully going to be able to come on every single week and be able to talk Utah football. So looking forward to that. I feel like I keep teasing this out, but it's coming. We're going to get it. It's going to happen. So it's just a matter of kind of getting all the semantics taken care of and everything worked out. So we are, if you're listening to this on Thursday, and I'm getting this out a little later than I planned, but if you're listening to this on Thursday, we're now 2 days away from kickoff. This is the beginning of the Big 12 slate for Utah. Yes, they did play Baylor, but as previously mentioned, that was considered a non-conference game and will not count towards the Utah schedule for conference games. So this is going into the conference slate, and you're starting that slate with arguably one of the best teams in the Big 12. We'll still see, and these two teams are both 3-0, and we'll kind of get a good taste of what this is. But either way, both teams are being talked about as potentially making it to the Big 12 title game. Kansas State's being thrown in there. Some other teams are being thrown in there. But these two, this game especially, has been kind of penciled in as, I wouldn't even call it the de facto, decider, but it has a large bearing on what could be the rest of the season, right? The winner of this game will take a big step toward getting into that Big 12 title game. It definitely won't hurt a team in terms of knocking them out, but anytime you win a key conference game, that is good for you. So that's what's at stake, as if you needed to know that, but just, reminding where we're at. So this week, obviously, there's a lot of questions about Cam Rising. Man, we're back. Yeah, Cam Rising. There's a lot of questions because I feel like people want there to be a lot of questions. Cam was made available to us on Monday. That's not typically something that happens on a week when a player is going to miss. That's not to say that that always is the case, but typically they don't trot out Cam if they don't believe he's going to play, and so he was readily available for us. On top of that, asking Dorian Singer about the different quarterbacks and what's going on there, he came out and specifically just said that he's good to go. Cam is going to be out there on the field and go. And that was Monday. Kyle Whittingham kind of changed the tune just a tiny bit on Tuesday, but that's his MO. He just said he hopes so, and that would be ideal if Cam is on the field on Saturday. So you're getting a lot of different things going on there. The reality is Cam has been practicing all week. He's been in there, whereas that was not the case last week. Isaac was taking the full reps. Cam is taking the reps this week. Things could change, sure, but as it stands, Cam is going to be your starter on Saturday. This is a great opportunity for Utah. Who knows the lingering effects of his hand and how it's healed and different things that way. But it looks like that he's going to give it a go on Saturday. If not, you do have Isaac that obviously has now a little bit more experience. One starting game doesn't change everything, but at least you know what you've got. But I think in this case, in a road environment, you need Cam as best as he can be. Obviously, if he's not able to grip the ball in a way that is conducive to being the starting quarterback or different things that way, that changes it. But I think you're going to at least get his best shot in what he's got available right now. He's going to go out there, as you've seen. He's not going to just sit on the sideline if he doesn't have to. So we'll see what happens. But as part of that, late last night, there became this betting line madness. So on Sunday, the betting lines are put out by all the respective sports books out there. ESPN is now a sports book, so they put theirs out there as well. And on Sunday I looked, and it was anywhere between 2 to 3. Some people saw it as 3-point favorite for Oklahoma State. That's not totally surprising considering Utah coming into this with, some injury questions and not really knowing what's going on there. Oklahoma State's at home. This is a conference game. It's a tough environment to play. And 3 points typically is kind of just like the typical swing that you give to the home team just for being the home team as long as they're good, right? If there are equal level teams, generally you're going to get that kind of respect. So anyways, when I saw it on Sunday, it was at -2, which means that Oklahoma State is giving 2 points to Utah in the betting lingo, allowing them to be able to be the favorite, right? So Utah was the underdog going into this when the lines opened. Oklahoma State was the favorite. Well, that shifted, I believe it was Monday. I'm losing track of time now because of how this has kind of gone on, where it shifted to Utah, and Utah became a 1.5 to 2.5 point favorite, depending on where you're going, right? These are going to vary. Either way, Utah became the favorite, and so there was this little swing that took place. A lot of people read into that to say that Cam is starting, and that means that Utah is going to be the better team, yada, yada, yada. Betting lines have a lot of different reasons for changing. The big money, the people that are betting on these more so professionally, those are the ones that generally bring the bigger swings. They're the ones bringing a large amount of money. You and I putting money down isn't necessarily going to change it a ton. That's not to say that it can't, but usually it takes a massive amount of money to get big swings. You'll get, a 1-2 point swing here or there, just based on the general public. But for the most part, it takes a lot of money to swing that kind of momentum. So there's a lot of different things there. A lot of these people that pay close attention, they're considered sharps, the people that get it first and do all this, they get a lot of this quote-unquote inside information and are doing what they can to be there first, get the line before anybody else does, and that way they can make a lot of their money. So you get that. Utah's the favorite. Everything looks good. You're coming into this game, and Utah looks like the favorite going into Stillwater for their first conference game. And then, like I said, late last night, everything changed, and everything kind of shifted hands where suddenly Oklahoma State became a 1.5 point favorite and then a 2.5 point favorite. Some places saw 3. Totally shifted back into Oklahoma State's favor. That led to a bunch of people believing that Cam Rising was out. That's not entirely true, and I'm not going to get into the nuances of it. Just know that Cam Rising is expected to be the starter. I'm not going to get into the nuances of it just because Cam is your guy, right? And that's where it is. You can take it what it is, but betting lines do have some sway on that kind of stuff. But for the most part, just take it for what it is and the information that these guys get. As of now, from all the information that I've been told and the people that I've talked to, it looks like Cam is going to be your starter. Now, until that is officially declared, there's always a possibility. So it's like, some people could come out here and say, Josh, you tweeted that. I haven't tweeted that. I haven't even said that. I'm saying he's expected to be the starter, but there's always a chance that things change. So with that out of the way, expect to have Cam there. It should be a fun time for all. This will be the first true game where we get to kind of really see who Cam is this year. Yes, we've gotten to see him in Southern Utah, and we got to see him a little bit in Baylor, but we really haven't gotten a chance to see who he is as a quarterback, especially against tough competition. So this is going to be a tall task, right? Like if he is injured and there is some lingering effects to his finger being hurt, he wasn't wearing a bandage on Monday, but Mondays are more of a walkthrough anyway. I'm curious to see how that kind of shapes up and kind of what happens there. But either way, this becomes a fun environment. It's an opportunity to allow Utah to kind of see how this offense moves with their starting quarterback, assuming that he is healthy and that everything goes well. Beyond that, other injury news, Karene Reed, it's doubtful that he plays this week. I think just the comments that Kyle has said without fully saying that he's out has indicated that he's out. It also lines up with what I've heard. There was a little thing on the coach's show that Kyle talked about where he kind of said it a little bit more definitively in the sense that Karene was out. That is a big blow for Utah's defense, simply because of what he does on that side of the ball, right? He's the one with the helmet communication, and that's not to say that somebody else doesn't have it, but he's the one getting that information. But regardless of the helmet communication, which I don't think generally helps the defense that much because they still have to get their signals and everything, he's just he's the guy that kind of glues it all together, right? He's the guy that helps with the communication. He's getting guys in the right spots. He's just a veteran guy that understands what's going on. So that puts the onus on somebody like a Sione Fotu, Lander Barton. It just kind of changes the tone of this team in terms of communication. And when you're playing a team like Oklahoma State, that communication becomes absolutely vital. Now, with that being said, I'm not saying that Karene makes this defense significantly worse. I think it's significantly better if he's there, but at the same time, I think they've got enough pieces that they can mix and match with that. It all depends on what other injuries that they have. Some other guys that are banged up. I've heard some other guys that are banged up, but I've seen them at practice, so I'm not going to get into that nuance of it. It doesn't matter to spread a lot of that information, but know that Utah, for the most part, is pretty healthy. They come into this as healthy as you possibly can be, given that this is the football season, that everything is going on. So, So we got that out of the way. That's your injury news. That's your injury report. That's all that people really care about, honestly. We're 12 minutes into this podcast, and we haven't even touched the game yet. So, but honestly, that's what most people want to hear, right? So don't fret until something actually happens and you don't see your favorite player on the field. But until then, everything seems to be going okay. Utah, they believe they have the talent and the ability to be able to go into Stillwater and showcase why they were picked to win the conference. So looking at this game, let's jump right into this. You do have a Utah team that is ranked number 12 in the AP Top 25 poll. Oklahoma State is just 2 spots lower at number 14. So this game, it's going to have a lot of attention. It's on 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time in Fox. So you get the big Fox, the game that a lot of people can be tuning into if they're interested in that. And it has the potential to kind of propel either one of these teams into the top of the Big 12. Yes, Kansas State is still in that mix, and they play BYU this week. But I don't know, regardless of the result there. Yeah, obviously if they lose to BYU, that hurts them. I don't know if beating BYU necessarily propels them. That's not a knock on BYU. I just think it's the nature of kind of how this looks. You've got 2 top 25 teams now going against each other in Utah and Oklahoma State that just kind of sets the tone for how this goes, especially if one of these teams is able to really dictate the terms, right? Let's say Utah is able to do that and wins by, comfortably, 2 touchdowns, let's say. I think this will actually be close, so I'm not going to say that. But this becomes a great opportunity for whichever team to be able to kind of cement themselves as kind of that forerunner in the national landscape, right? And as much as people don't want to pay attention to that. If your team is being talked about in the national scene, that's only good things for you, right? It's on the committee's minds. Obviously, they shouldn't have that kind of bias in terms of listening to what ESPN or Fox is saying, but it puts it in there, right? If you're constantly talking about a team and you're constantly saying, okay, Utah this, Utah that, it's just kind of there. You kind of build it up and to believe it, that helps. And so you always want to be that team that can take that step, right? And if Utah really wants to establish itself as the leader of the Big 12 in the first year, this becomes a vital game. Now, once again, I don't think this is going to be some earth-shaking game, to Utah if they lose this. I think it would damage them, right? I think that would take a blow by all means. But at the same time, I don't think in this conference there's a team that's probably going to go unscathed. It's just a matter of where you lose and who you lose to that's going to shake out. And the real harm here is just you're losing to another competitor. If you lost to, let's say, an Arizona State, which is good, they've been getting better, it doesn't appear like they're going to be in the conference mix, and maybe they will be, but at least you've dropped a game that isn't as valuable or as important to another team. So we're not quite to my spreadsheet or my flow chart, that's what we'll call it, of the conference look, because we're way too early for that. But I know that some people are already asking for that kind of stuff, and it's kind of interesting. It's not fun to do that. So, but yeah. So Oklahoma State, they're 3-0. They've played South Dakota State, Arkansas, and Tulsa. South Dakota State being the FCS team, but they're a great team. If you look at these, so Bill Conley has this stat he calls SP+, and if you've been on ESPN, you may be familiar with it. He essentially just tries to find a metric that can kind of equalize teams, right? Try to figure out who they are, how they play. Some of that goes into, some of the preseason data and last year's data goes into it. And so it's not a fully perfect model, especially early on in the season. But he's relatively close, right? In terms of how we perceive these teams. He's always tweaking it and trying to fine tune it to get it better. But the reality is there's no real true way to rank a team because all the teams have different strength of schedules and they have different components. So it's not easy. But as best as you can, SP Plus becomes one of the better ones out there, right? He's been able to do this for a long time. A lot of metrics go into this, a lot of data goes into it, and it works out. The point that I'm bringing that into here is so he's started to rank every single college football team in the country, not just, FBS. He's put FCS in there, Division II, Division III, those types of things in there. And so it's kind of an interesting look to see how these teams fare out. It's 700-something teams is what I remember. But the point here is when you're looking at FBS and FCS, it's hard to kind of equate, is this FCS team better than this team, right? So looking at the South Dakota State, if you were to kind of fully roll it out, they would be ranked 92nd in the country. Not bad for an FCS team. There's 70, I'm trying to remember, 70 teams in, no, sorry, 134 teams in FBS. So you're better than, 40 teams in FBS? That's pretty impressive. So there's that. Arkansas ranked 28th. That shouldn't come as a surprise. Good team in the SEC. And then Tulsa is actually ranked at 119th, which is lower than South Dakota State, so you can kind of see that variance there. If you're interested in how these kind of shake out for Utah, Southern Utah is 195th, Baylor 44th, and Utah State 125th. So in some respects, Oklahoma State has had a tougher schedule. In all respects, actually, if you go off of those ratings, that they've had a tougher schedule. So take it for what it is. These aren't apple to apples. Each game is its own little enigma, and so you kind of get into that. So the point here being is Oklahoma State is 3-0, comfortable win over South Dakota State, 44-20. You've got Arkansas. You took to double overtime, had to rally back. Arkansas was complete troll of that game. Former Ute Jaquindon Jackson, I believe he had 3 rushing touchdowns to give them. I don't remember if it was 21-0 lead or 21-7. I watched part of that first part of the game and just kind of assumed that Arkansas was gonna roll. They were looking good in Stillwater, absolutely had command of that game, and Oklahoma State battled back. They found a way to do it. There was a few lucky things that went their way that allowed them to get there. We don't need to get into that. But the point is they come away in a double overtime game and win by 8 points against Arkansas, a good team. So quality win. If you're looking at Oklahoma State, they do have a better quality win than Utah right now. And so, their resume right now is kind of a little bit more proven in that ability. Then you have Tulsa that they played last week, which was a 45-10 game. Honestly, was probably one of their most complete games. Looked really good from top to bottom. There's things to nitpick. Obviously, it's early in the season, but this was a game where Oklahoma State really kind of took a step up. Looked like they were playing some good football and absolutely gives them momentum. Tulsa's not a good team, though. It's hard to glean a ton from that game just simply because of that. But at the same time, they came away with a good-looking team, and so that bodes well for this Oklahoma State team. So you're getting two teams that are kind of coming into this game in different ways. I think if you look at this Utah team, you kind of I wouldn't say that it's a downer, Phil, but I think it is in terms of kind of how you felt these games were going to go. Overall, I think there's a lot of optimism about where Utah's at, right? They're 3-0. Doesn't really matter how you won. You obviously understand the nuances of how this is done. You're breaking in a brand new quarterback last week. He goes out midway through the second game, a game that probably Utah could have won 40 plus to, 7. This was a game that was absolutely trending in Utah's way. So I think all of that changes if those things were there. But by and large, this is two teams that are coming into this with different feels. With that being said, though, I think this gives Utah a little bit more focus in the sense that things haven't been perfect, right? You go to Utah State, which was always going to be a tough task just because of who they're playing, where they're playing, and just what was on the schedule the week after, that it just kind of makes it difficult. And so, yes, it wasn't a perfect game. There was things that they needed to fix, and they're not shying away from that. That's what they're expecting to do. But this becomes a different challenge where, going into the season, I said Utah has to find out how to play as the hunted. They have to go in knowing that every single team is going to be coming after them simply because of where they were picked in the Big 12, right? Now, you're coming into this, and had things gone the way that everybody expected, where Cam's playing through these games, you're rolling through that schedule, you could come into this Oklahoma State kind of, feeding up your confidence a little bit, believing in yourself to the point where you kind of take things off a little bit. And so I think coming into this game the way that Utah isn't necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, those things can snowball, especially if they continue to be long-term problems. But this is a situation where Utah can actually build off that momentum and say, hey, we haven't reached our peak yet. We're not killing teams the way that we expected to. This is how we need to do it. And you focus in all that energy on Oklahoma State. Now, that's not to say Oklahoma State's not going to come focused. They understand the importance of this game. I think these two teams have watched more film on each other than any other team on the schedule this year, just because they understand the importance of it. They understand what goes into this. At the same time, Oklahoma State has Kansas State on the schedule, and so they can't put all their eggs in their basket in this game. But, you would be crazy to think that they're not scheming up ways to beat Utah and trying to do different things. So excited to see how these two teams match up. Like I said, it's the real first true test for either team, although you can argue that, Oklahoma State was tested with Arkansas, and I do believe that they were tested with that, so I'm not going to say argue, but they were tested, and they found a way to do it. And so trying to win in Stillwater is not going to be an easy task. Injuries on Oklahoma State. So earlier this season, they lost their star defensive end, Colin Oliver. He has a season-ending injury. At least it's expected to be. There's a chance maybe he could come back. I'd be surprised. But he's their highest-graded defender, a guy that absolutely is a game changer. If he plays in this game, he's a guy that Utah has to absolutely pay attention to. You have to make sure that you focus in on him, not to the point where he becomes your sole attention, but obviously he's going to take some attention and do that. But he's not there, and so that changes a little bit of stuff for Oklahoma State. They've also lost Jake Springfield to an injury. He's their team's best pass blocker. He's on the offensive line. he's day to day, essentially, from what I can see from the reports there. But it doesn't sound like he's going to be there, so that limits that veteran unit that they have. That's not to say that this offensive line can't be okay. But when you start pulling away, some of your best guys, it does hurt. And quite honestly, this offensive line for Oklahoma State hasn't fully lived up to the potential, and especially in the run game, that I think Oklahoma State fans are expecting, or even Mike Gundy is expecting. This is a team that is absolutely great at pass blocking. They have done a phenomenal job of being able to protect and really just keep the game plan within themselves to be able to allow them to get these passing yards and do whatever they need to. Run game has been a completely different situation, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit. But this is, you lose your best pass blocker in the offensive line, at least in terms of grades from PFF. That does something, right? So I'm sure they wish they had him. There's also another offensive lineman that has starter minutes. He hasn't played at all this year, so it's not like it's somebody that has been on the line and then suddenly left. It's Jason Brooks Jr., but he's been injured, hasn't been able to see the field yet, and then just recently announced that he's going into the transfer portal. So they're going to be without him. Not much of a factor here, especially this season, because he hasn't played. He got injured last season. So that's the extent of it. There are other injuries, like Utah has other injuries, but it's not any that I'm going to point to. So we're going to go with that. So looking at just kind of some general stats for this Oklahoma State team, their offense has been pretty solid. It's not where they want it to be in the run game. So, for example, their passing offense is 8th, right? They're averaging 334 yards per game, which is pretty great. Take into account what those teams are that they've played, and especially against Arkansas, that's a good number, right? You're getting that. Some of those are still going to be inflated from the Tulsas and the South Dakota States where you're blowing out teams, but by and large, this has been a good passing offense. Rushing, you would think that the rushing side would be much higher with Ollie Gordon, in the backfield. This is a guy that absolutely exploded on the scene last year. He's a guy that everybody's going to focus in on. He can make those plays and do what he needs to, but that run game hasn't really developed. It's averaging only 112 yards per game for 150th in the country. Utah fans have complained about their run game, and Utah ranks 40th in the country. So you can kind of see the difference there. Utah's averaging about 200 yards. It's 192. Oklahoma State's at a 112. So you can see that there's just simply not that same level of production. Fortunately for the Cowboys, though, they have been able to absolutely dominate in the passing game and have done really well and been able to kind of move the ball in a way that allows them to not really worry about Ollie Gordon, which sounds crazy considering what type of a player he is. Outside of that, this has been a team that has been pretty effective in all that they've done. About a 41% third down conversion rate, 72% on fourth down. Red zone, though, they've scored 93.3% of the times in the red zone. So they're able to get there. Majority of those have been touchdowns. So this is a team that when they get there, they've been able to produce and do it well. They're getting turnovers. They haven't allowed any sacks this year, which is wild. That goes to show kind of how good their offensive line is. We'll see what that looks like against this Utah team, which is averaging about 2.3 sacks per game. Which one breaks first, right? Does Oklahoma State get a sack, or does Utah continue to kind of roll with that, have their defensive ends moving along and doing what they need to? That's a brief overlook of the offense. Defensively, just hasn't been as good. This is a team that, they're scoring defense. They're allowing teams, 20.3 points per game. That's fine and dandy. I don't really care about that stat too much simply because of who they've played outside of Arkansas. Run defense, they're 93rd, allowing 157 yards, so that bodes well for Utah if they can get their ground game going. Passing defense, they rank 129th in the country. Like I said before, there's 134 teams, if I'm remembering correctly. That's just not been great for Oklahoma State. They're allowing 305 passing yards per game. Utah is 26th in passing. That means, they have the chance to be able to move the ball there. If Cam is feeling well, if they can get those open receivers, this becomes a great opportunity for Utah to absolutely feed off of that pass defense. I expect all of these areas to be improved from Oklahoma State, but it's just not that easy, right? You've got to be able to work hard and kind of correct something that is not just simple things to do. It takes a few weeks at the very least to be able to correct some of these things, and sometimes it's just inexperience. So that'll be kind of interesting to see how Utah attacks this. It seems like they can get their yards in either the run or the passing game. And so if Utah can be moderately successful in these areas, you have to give them at least a shot to be able to do it. So, that bodes well for Utah, at least in that game. So curious to see, like I said, how that works, but we shall see how these two teams go against each other. Obviously, Utah wants to see more of a passing game. We started to see a little bit more of that with Dorian Singer. You've gotten Luca Caldarella in there. You're getting Brant Keithy, obviously, Caleb Lohner, some of these other tight ends, Money Parks. Isaac Wilson threw to 9 receivers against Utah State, so it's not a shortage of options. It's now just a matter of kind of who it's going to be, and we'll see what's that. So let's look at some of these players. Let's start with Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon has only had 216 rushing yards this year. That's the worst. It's gotten worse as the season developed. That's what I meant to say. So he did well in that first week, had something like 112 rushing yards in week 1, and really just hasn't done anything these last 2 weeks. It just hasn't been there for him. He's getting blown up on the line. Teams are loading up the box and really making it difficult for him to be able to get out of that pressure. Obviously a very talented back, but he just hasn't been able to do it. For example, two of his games this year, he's averaged only 2.4 yards per carry. That was against Tulsa, the game that they absolutely looked really good, and 2.9 yards per carry against Arkansas. That's just not going to cut it, right? You've heard me say that Kyle Whittingham preaches that he wants to see somewhere around 5 yards per carry as a team, but that you're starting back, especially of somebody of Ollie Gordon's caliber, he should be around 5 yards per carry, and he's just not been able to produce. You got to be careful with these stats, though, because it's easy to say, oh, well, he's not producing, that Utah's going to roll, that defense is going to lock him up and everything's going to be okay. It's just not that easy. We looked at Utah State last week, for example, and their red zone offense had been atrocious. They simply just couldn't score in the red zone. They were getting field goals, maybe, but they weren't able to get any touchdowns. All their touchdown scores came outside of the red zone. And then you saw what happened against them against Utah. They found ways to be able to make some plays and score when they needed to. So these things aren't always a one-to-one thing where you look at it and say, oh, well, he's struggling, he's always going to struggle. But it's something to be mindful of, right? You can look at how teams have defended him. Mike Gundy, the head coach, was talking about this this week in his press conference and said he expects a lot of teams to load the box, right? They expect teams to load the box. They would probably expect Utah to load the box. And in loading the box, they're just trying to put a lot of pressure there or disguise that pressure. Morgan Scalley's really good at trying to disguise that pressure and looking like he's going to blitz or bringing the house, and then, falls back into coverage and suddenly what you thought you had wasn't there. It'll be interesting to see the kind of the cat and mouse game that goes on between this and see what happens. But you also have to look at Oklahoma State and say, if Rasul Fasan from Utah State can absolutely gash Utah, we love our chances with Ollie Gordon. Like, you can see how this mind game works, and they'd be absolutely right. You can see things where Utah just wasn't assignment sound, and they can use that to exploit Utah in that and allow Ollie Gordon to cook, as the kids say, right? But this is going to be a matchup that I don't think it is even the what wins the game, right? I think obviously you have to stop the run. I think Utah has paid a lot of emphasis on that, and they're going to do that. But in this game, it becomes a little different. You have wide receivers on this team that are absolutely talented. You have Dejon Stribling, Brennan Presley, Rashad Owens, and then last week, Talon I can't even say his name, Shetron, Chetron? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to go with that. Some days I just can't speak. Oh, most days I can't speak. So the fact that you're listening to a podcast becomes a challenge. Um, but they've got some very talented wide receivers that are going to be able to, get open. They're going to find ways to exploit that secondary, and their quarterback Alan Bowman, if he can get it to him, and he's done a good job this year. If he can get it to them, this becomes a great asset for Utah. So as much as you want to say that stopping the run game is going to help Utah win, yes, it will. If you can lock up Ollie Gordon, I think that does a lot of good for Utah. But they can't ignore what's going to happen in the secondary. These players are phenomenal. They're going to be able to get their yards, and they're going to get chunk yards, right? And if you don't clean up what happened last week with Utah's secondary, guys out of spacing, they're not taking the right read. Honestly, it was just really the communication. This becomes a big worry. Bryson Barnes was beating Utah, and I think that, some of those balls were placed in a way that were just perfect, right? He heaved them up and they worked perfectly. But you're now going to go up against a quarterback that is far more proficient in what he does, has the experience, that this becomes much more of a challenge where you have to play it the right way or you're going to get gashed, right? And if Utah suddenly gets, 2 touchdowns quickly from Oklahoma State and can't find ways to get offense on their own, that becomes a big challenge. So big key there is stopping that, keeping everything in front of them. You're going to take, they're going to get their yardage, but if you can get it in that short to middle of range, that's going to be better. Any of those deep shots that, especially where that DB is exposed one-on-one, if the high safety can't get over there, that becomes a challenge for Utah. So curious to see how that goes, but this wide receiver talent is great. And like I said, the offensive line has been pretty elite in pass blocking this year for Oklahoma State. And so that trends well for them there. Middle of the row, run blocking, as we've seen. So I think we'll see kind of the emphasis there. But this becomes, like I said, a cat and mouse type game to see what's going to happen. Does Utah find ways to limit them, make them one-dimensional? And if they can that actually work? Because I think this is a team that, let's say that secondary, Utah secondary, can lock down the passing game. Does Ollie Gordon suddenly break free and change the tone of that game? So not exactly the easiest of game plans in that regard, but Utah's experienced this before. They're well versed in it. It's just a matter of trying to make sure that they take their shots when they can without overexposing themselves. Now looking at the quarterback, Alan Bowman, veteran guy. A lot of people on social media have wanted to make the claims that Cam and Alan Bowman are the 2 oldest quarterbacks. Yeah, they're old, right? They're experienced, they're veteran guys, whatever. The point there being that, this is a guy that he's not super flashy. Like, he's not one of those guys that everybody's talking about around the country as one of the best quarterbacks, even though his numbers have been near the top for a lot of these metrics. He's just not a guy that they're projecting, a lot of great things. He's not a Shadir Sanders, not that many are, but a lot of people aren't as flashy as him. So he's a guy that just gets in there, much more of a pocket presence guy. He wants to stay in the pocket. He's not a dual threat guy. He's not going to run out of the pocket unless he absolutely has to, and even then, he's going to try to stay within the pocket. So Utah can kind of work with that. They don't have to worry about like what Bryson Barnes did last week, where you gotta respect the fake handoff and then he goes off for the QB keep or whatever it may be. This is a quarterback that is going to stay mostly upright and do what he can to distribute that ball. And so far this year, he's graded out really well. He's actually graded out the best in his deep passes, 20-plus yards. Only 15 attempts, and he's only connected on 4, but he's graded out really high on those. It just shows that he has the ability if he can make them. It's just a matter of how the defense plays them. By and large, though, he's done well. In 2023, even for that matter, looking back on those stats, he hits a lot of the short and middle of the field. That's where he makes up most of his yards. And he's going to be graded highest on those medium yards, like the 10 to 19 yard range. But that absolutely moves the ball, and that helps. So you got to be mindful of that and respectful of that. He also grades really well in keeping whether you blitz him or if he's got a clean pocket, he's been able to do really well that way, at least this year. Last year, if you put him under pressure, he was actually significantly worse, right? Like, so his grades, when you kept the pocket clean and when you didn't blitz him, he was pretty great. If you can put pressure on that offensive line, his numbers, or at least his grades and his ability to be able to do what he wants to do, go down significantly, especially if he's under pressure, right? It doesn't have to be a blitz. It just has to be under pressure, and his grades go down significantly. So this is a quarterback where Utah can, I don't want to say it's easier, because you're going up against an offensive line that is experienced. They understand what they need to do. I don't know if they've experienced like an offensive or a defensive line like Utah's, and we don't really fully know what that will entail. But if Utah can put any amount of pressure on him, collapse that pocket, make him have to think in a little bit faster timeline, that's going to bode well for Utah just based on his past, right? Once again, that has nothing to do with what he will do in this game. It's just how he's been in the past. He hasn't been as good in that. Now, that's not some earth-shattering surprise, right? Most quarterbacks aren't going to be as good when they're pressured. So it's not like this is crazy. But at the same time, if they can find ways to do that, if they can create havoc plays and do different things that way to put pressure on that offensive line, you've absolutely changed the tone of this game. So for me, the biggest key of this game, I said, is it stopping the run? Is it stopping the pass? And I honestly think this one, more than any game that Utah's going to have most of the season, is trench play. If Utah can win in the trenches, and if they can create pressure from their defensive line, where they can, put Alan Bowman into these pressure situations, I think that's going to bode well more than anything, right? Once again, he can still find his opportunities and he can still get that ball out, but I think that's where Utah can win. Offensively, obviously, if their offensive line is doing well and limiting the pressure, keeping Cam upright, and not letting this defense do too much, I think that obviously gives them much. But I don't even know that one is as much as Utah's defense trying to attack Oklahoma State's offense. I think this is a situation where that absolutely will be the tone of the game. So really fascinating game. I was hoping to kind of talk a little bit more with some people to kind of see what their view of all this is, but it's going to be a hostile environment. It's a stadium about the same size as Utah's in terms of attendance. They pack people in there. The fields or the fans are incredibly close to the field, and so it's a tight area. Curious to see how this is. There's been a lot of great trash talk on Twitter. I have to say I respect Big 12 Twitter for their trash talk game, because for the most part, as much as coming into the year there was a lot of hatred towards Utah just for what they're saying is their pompous attitude and thinking that they're going to come in and roll the Big 12. I think it's been fun to be able to kind of watch these fan bases kind of attack each other, but mostly do it in a creative and respectful way, where the winner comes out of this and gaining the respect of the other and having fun. So it's been fun. That's kind of been a new development that I've seen that has been a lot of fun, but I just think this will be a great opportunity for either one of these teams. If you're traveling to Stillwater, take it in for what it's worth, and being able to be in a true college town where there's going to be a lot of fan interest and tailgating and people that just want to be a part of college football. That's what Utah wants to be a part of, right? They want to be a part of that pageantry. They want to be able to be a part of all that it is. So you've got to be excited about this. If Utah can get the win, this sets a huge, road for momentum for Utah. It's just one game, but at the same time, it becomes a good benchmark or a measuring stick for how this team can progress throughout the season. So I think it'll be fun. I'm excited to get down there and kind of see how this is all going to shake out. Never been to Oklahoma State, so looking forward to it. But we'll catch you next week. Hopefully we have my special guest that will be able to break down some things and talk about how this game went. But with that said, we will sign off, and we will catch up with you next week. So have a good one.